The wind howled through the broken metal stalls of the old market. Snow fell from the dark sky like ash, cold and heavy. Vera's arms were shaking as she held her daughter close. The child Luma was too weak to cry. Her lips blue, her small feet purple and stiff, wrapped in torn cloth. The girl didn't move, just stared into the white fog with empty eyes. Vera's legs were sore, her back bent from walking all day. They had no shoes, no food, and no home. She had knocked on every door in the lower alley of the human colony. Most doors stayed shut, some slammed in her face. Others opened only to curse her, telling her to leave and not beg like a stray beast. A tall trader had thrown something at her earlier. A cold piece of metal. He laughed as it hit her face and shouted, "Starve somewhere else." Alien Vera didn't cry. She couldn't waste water from her body. Her breath came out in sharp gasps. Her arms around Luma like a cage. She stopped. Near a fire barrel, where two humans stood warming their hands. She stepped forward slowly, her voice shaking. "Please, one meal. For my child. I'll give you anything. I'll be yours tonight. Just feed her." The two men looked her up and down and laughed. "She's almost dead. And you're barely standing." "Get lost," one said. The other added, "Even if you were free, we wouldn't take you." Vera backed away, ashamed, holding Luma tighter. The child made a soft sound, not quite a cry, more like a sigh. It cut through Vera like a blade. She kept walking, passing the brighter parts of the colony where no one looked poor. Warm lights glowed behind thick windows, families inside laughing and eating. The smell of soup, meat, and baked bread filled the air. It made her stomach twist in pain. She reached the last corner of the colony. Near the old guard post, her knees finally gave out, and she sank to the ground beside a rusted crate. Luma wasn't moving anymore. Her breath was so soft. Vera couldn't even feel it. Vera looked up at the sky, tears freezing on her cheeks. She whispered, "Please, someone. Just one meal. Take me, use me, I don't care. Just don't let her die." But the sky gave no answer, only more cold wind. She leaned forward, wrapping her body around Luma's small form, trying to give her what little heat she had left, and then she heard footsteps, slow and heavy. She looked up and saw a human man walking toward her. He wore a dark coat, his boots strong and old. He had a beard and deep eyes that didn't look cruel like the others. He stopped a few feet away, saying nothing, just staring at them. Vera sat up straighter, forcing herself to speak. "You can have me. Tonight or forever. I don't care. Just feed her. Just one hot meal, please." The man didn't speak. Instead, he knelt down, reached into his coat, and took out a thick wool blanket. He gently placed it over Luma, then slowly picked the child up, holding her against his chest. Luma's head fell on his shoulder, her tiny hand curling slightly. Vera gasped, afraid he was taking her away. She scrambled to her feet, weak but desperate. "Wait, where are you taking her?" she cried, stumbling forward. The man turned slightly, his voice quiet but firm, "Somewhere warm." Then he looked at Vera and said, "Come, before you both freeze to death." Vera followed, confused, afraid, and hopeful all at once. The man didn't say anything else, just walked through the snow with strong steps. The cold was still sharp, but something about his presence made it feel less painful. Vera kept glancing at Luma, still wrapped in his coat, still breathing, just barely. They walked past the edge of the colony toward the woods. A small cabin stood hidden among the trees, smoke rising from its chimney. The man opened the door and led them inside. Warmth hit Vera's face like a wave, and she nearly fell to the floor. He laid Luma gently on a soft pile of blankets near the fire. Then he turned to Vera and said, "Sit down." "Take off those wet clothes." Vera hesitated, unsure what he meant. The man looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't need to pay me with your body." Vera blinked, not understanding. "You made no promise to me," he said, and turned. Away to get warm broth from the stove, Vera sat slowly, tears filling her eyes again. But this time, they weren't from shame or fear. They were from something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Asterisk, the cabin was small, but warm like a dream. Thick walls, a burning fire, and the smell of herbs in the air. Vera had not felt such heat in so long. Her fingers twitched in confusion. She sat near the fire, still shaking, while the man Jared worked quietly. He took off his coat and boots, then knelt beside Luma, gently. He unwrapped the child from the frozen cloth and checked her feet. They were cold and purple, stiff like wood, but still, her tiny chest moved slow, but alive. Without a word, Jared took a silver jar from a shelf, opened it, and dipped his fingers into the green gel inside. He rubbed it carefully onto Luma's feet, then wrapped them in soft cloth. He placed a heated brick beneath her blanket, then turned back to the stove. Vera watched every movement, heart pounding. He was helping her daughter, without touching her. Without asking for her body, she didn't understand it. He returned with a steaming cup and sat beside Vera. "Here," he said, handing her the cup. "Drink slowly. It's broth, from bone and root." Vera took it with shaking hands, sipped it slowly, the heat burning her throat. It tasted like safety. Luma coughed, a weak sound, but alive. She opened her eyes slightly, her lips dry, her voice barely a whisper. "Ma." Vera crawled toward her, pressing her lips to the girl's forehead. "I'm here, my star," she whispered. "You're safe now." Jared added more wood to the fire, the flames growing bright and strong. Then he placed a pot on the stove. Tossing dried meat and sliced roots into boiling water, the smell filled the cabin. Earthy and rich, Luma sniffed, her little nose twitching. And for the first time in days, she blinked toward the scent. Jared brought a small wooden bowl and sat beside Luma. He held a spoon gently to her lips. She sipped, paused, then sipped again. Tears rolled down Vera's face as she watched her daughter eat. Not a feast, not a grand meal, just soup, but it was everything. Vera looked at Jared, her voice low. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Jared stared at the fire. Quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Because once a woman gave my child soup when I couldn't." Vera didn't know how to respond. She looked down, then slowly began removing the outer rags from her body. Her skin was pale, covered in bruises. She stood silently, hands at her side, then whispered, "I can give you what you want. You saved us. I'll be yours." Jared stood, his face calm but firm. "No," he said. "You don't owe me your body." "But I promised," she said, confused. "I told you I would." He cut her off gently. "You made no promise to me." He turned his back and added herbs to the stew. "You gave an offer to survive," he said. "I accepted the chance to help, not to take." Vera sank to her knees, ashamed, tears falling again. She wasn't used to kindness, not without a price. She had sold everything before: jewelry, clothes, pride, and when all that was gone, she offered herself, but Jared didn't take. Later that night, as the fire dimmed, Luma fell asleep on a warm blanket, her small hand wrapped around Vera's finger. Jared sat at the table, reading from a thin book. Vera sat nearby, her eyes heavy, but her heart awake. She stared at him and whispered, "Thank you." Jared nodded. Not looking up, "She's strong," he said softly, "too strong to give up now." Vera smiled faintly. "She's all I have." "Then hold on to her." Jared said, "This world takes enough already." The snow outside thickened, pressing against the windows. But inside, the fire kept burning. and for the first time in weeks. Vera didn't feel cold, not in her hands, not in her heart. She watched Luma breathe, steady now, color returning to her cheeks, and she watched Jared, quiet and calm, his kindness strange but real. A stranger had saved them not with weapons, or money, or power, but with fire, broth, and silence, and somehow that felt more powerful than anything. The morning came slow and quiet. Sunlight pushed through the frost-covered windows of the cabin, painting the wooden floor with soft gold. Luma still slept, her chest rising and falling in peace. Her feet no longer purple. Vera sat beside her. Daughter, eyes wide open, heart full of questions. She had not slept all night. Not because of fear, but because something inside her had changed. Warmth surrounded her now. But it wasn't just the fire. It was the silence, the safety, and the strange human who had given her both without asking for anything in return. Jared stood outside, chopping frozen wood into smaller pieces. Each strike echoed through the snowy trees like a heartbeat. He worked like a man used to pain. Silent and alone, Vera watched him through the window, wondering what story lived behind those cold eyes. She made tea from dry leaves he had left near the stove, careful not to spill. She placed a cup near his spot on the table, unsure if it was the right thing to do. Then, hearing the door creak, she looked up and saw him enter. Cheeks red from the wind, he noticed the cup and nodded once. "Thank you," he said, sitting down and drinking slowly. Vera didn't know how to speak to him. Not like this, not as equals. But silence had ruled her life too long, so she forced herself to talk. "I want to tell you something," she said, voice thin but steady. Jared looked at her, waiting. "My world was green once." She began. It had trees with soft blue leaves, and the rivers glowed under moonlight. He said nothing, so she went on. "When the pirates came, they took the rich first, then the strong, then the loud. The rest of us they just left behind or used until we broke." Jared's eyes didn't change, but he listened. "My husband was a builder," she said, staring at her tea. "Not a fighter, but he stood in front of us when the pirates came. He bought me and Luma a few seconds. Just enough time to run to the last escape pod." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "The pod dropped us on a desert moon. I begged for help, but no one wanted a mother with a sick child." Jared looked at Luma, still sleeping. "They said she wouldn't make it, and I was too weak to carry value." Vera said, "Too skinny to serve, too poor to trade, and too broken to love." Her voice grew colder. "That's what one trader told me." Jared stood up slowly and walked to the window, staring out into the snow. "Then they're fools," he said quietly. Vera looked at him, surprised. "I've seen real weakness," he said, "and you are not it." Silence fell between them again, not heavy, but calm. Then Jared walked to a wooden chest in the corner and opened it. He pulled out old clothes-thick boots, a worn jacket, and a pair of gloves, too big for her now. He said, handing them over, "But they'll do." Vera took them gently, feeling the soft fabric in her hands. "These were your daughters?" she asked. Jared nodded, eyes distant. "She didn't make it through the last frost." He said simply, "I buried her behind the cabin." Vera froze, heart aching at the pain behind those words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shrugged, but his hand trembled as he set more wood into the fire. Later that day, Jared prepared more stew. Luma woke and smiled faintly when she saw food again. Vera fed her slowly, kissing her cheek between each spoon. Luma's strength was returning, one bite at a time. Jared brought out a small tin box and handed it to Vera. She opened it carefully, finding seeds inside beans, roots, small herbs. "I was going to plant them in spring," Jared said, "but maybe we plant them together." Vera held the seeds in her palm, eyes wide. This man wasn't giving her charity. He was giving her a future, a reason to stay that night. While Luma slept, Vera sat by the fire. She looked at Jared and whispered, "No." "One wanted me? Not really. Not until you," Jared replied without looking away from the flames. Then they were blind. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. The night was deep and silent. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like whispers of old ghosts. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting soft orange light on the wooden walls. Vera sat awake, her daughter Luma sleeping peacefully beside her. She looked around the small home, her eyes slowly resting on Jared. He sat in the corner, his back against the wall, his eyes closed, but his body tense. Even in sleep, he did not rest like most men. She stood quietly, careful not to wake Luma, and walked toward the shelf where his books were kept. Old paper books, worn and faded, with titles in human script she couldn't read. Beside them was a small wooden frame, almost hidden behind a jar of salt. Vera gently picked it up, brushing dust from the glass. The photo inside showed Jared, younger, smiling softly. Next to him stood a human woman with bright eyes, and between them a little girl with curly hair and wide dimples. Vera's heart ached. This was his family. Suddenly, a voice came from behind her, low and tired. "You found them," Jared said. His eyes now open, Vera turned quickly, placing the frame down with care. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. It's all right," he said, standing up slowly, walking toward her. He looked at the picture and sighed. "She was 4, he said, voice rough like sand. "My daughter's name was Elsie." Vera didn't speak, just listened. "We lived in a small town, far from the cities," Jared continued. "Didn't have much, but it was enough." He sat down at the table and motioned for her to join him. Vera sat across, her eyes still on his face. "She loved snow," he said with a faint smile. "She'd dance in it until her fingers turned red." "What happened?" Vera asked gently. Jared looked at the fire for a long time before answering. "There was a sickness, one that spread fast," he said. "Some called it a weapon. Others said it came from the stars." His voice grew colder. "The rich were moved off-world. The rest of us were told to survive on our own." Vera felt her breath catch in her throat. Jared went on. "My wife, Sarah, she tried to keep Elsie warm, tried to find food, medicine, anything." His hands tightened into fists. But winter came early that year, and with it, frostbite, hunger, fever. He looked at Vera now, eyes hollow. "I buried them under that tree," he said, pointing to the back window. Vera turned to look, and in the distance, she saw it a single tree with no leaves, standing tall in the snow. "I couldn't leave," Jared said. This was the last place they smiled. Vera's heart broke for him. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand on his. He didn't pull away. For a long moment they sat like that, two broken souls, quiet and breathing. Side by side, outside, the wind slowed and the snow began to fall gently. Inside, the pain still lived, but so did something else. "You helped me," Vera whispered. "Even when you were still hurting." Jared looked at her, his face softening. "I didn't save you," he said. "You walked through the storm with your daughter in your arms. That kind of strength, it's rare." Vera looked down at their hands, then back at him. "Maybe we're both still alive because someone needs us to be." Jared gave a small nod. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe the world just got tired of taking from us." They stood together and walked back to the fire. Luma stirred slightly, then curled closer into her blanket. Jared added another log to the flames, and the fire rose again. not just in the hearth but in their hearts. For the first time, Vera saw not just a protector in Jared, but a man who had lost everything and still chose to help a stranger. And Jared saw in Vera not just a refugee, but a mother, a survivor, and maybe, just maybe, someone who could help him heal too. The next morning, smoke rose gently from Jared's chimney. Inside, the cabin was warm, filled with quiet movement. Luma sat on a small stool near the fire, playing with a carved wooden bird, her eyes brighter than ever before. Vera was washing, a blanket with melted snow water, humming softly. And Jared was fixing the front door, tightening the hinges and checking the locks. For a moment, everything felt like peace. But peace never lasts long on the edges of a cold, forgotten town. At the same time, in the center of the colony, a man named Runk was telling stories in the pub. A cruel man, wide in the belly and narrow in the mind. He slammed his mug on the table and said loudly, "Saw that human loner yesterday." Carrying some alien runt wrapped in his coat, the room filled with mutters. An alien? In our town. Someone whispered, "A female." Asked another, "You sure?" Runk nodded, grinning. She looked desperate enough to sell herself for a potato, and he brought her into his cabin. Laughter followed, but it was bitter and cold. Why does he even stay out there? One man asked, "Because no one else can stand him." Another replied, "He lost it after the sickness took his family." They drank and laughed, but their words spread like poison by noon. 5 angry men gathered with coats, ropes, and old rifles. "We'll pay the quiet man a visit," Runk said. "Can't have alien beggars living among us like pests." And so they headed into the snow, drunk on power and hate, back at the cabin. Jared was finishing a stew. Vera helped slice roots while Luma sat drawing circles in the steam on the window. It felt like a home not perfect, but warm. Then Jared stopped moving, his ears catching something outside. Boots, voices, laughs, too loud, too many, too close. He stood up quickly and grabbed his coat. "Vera," he said calmly, "take Luma and go into the root cellar. Don't come out unless I call you." Vera's smile faded instantly. "Who is it?" she asked, already picking up Luma. Jared didn't answer, just opened a trapdoor behind the table and pointed down. "Go, now." Vera kissed Luma's forehead, whispered something into her ear, and climbed down the steps with her child. Jared closed the door behind them and placed the rug back over it. Then he picked up his old shotgun from the wall and walked to the door. When he opened it, cold wind rushed in, followed by the rough voices of men who had no kindness in their hearts. "Well, well," Runk said with a smirk. "Look at you, hiding your pets in the woods." Jared stepped outside and shut the door behind him. "They're under my roof," he said calmly. "That makes them my guests." One man raised his rifle slightly. "Don't play holy, Jared. You know the rules. Aliens aren't welcome." Here, another added, "What are you doing?" "Building yourself a new family, with a beggar and her half-dead brat." Jared didn't move, but his voice turned hard. "You're drunk, and you're walking on my land." The wind howled behind him, snow curling around his boots. "Turn around before I decide I'm done talking." The 5 men exchanged looks. Unsure now, Runk laughed, but took a step back. "You gonna shoot us for saying the truth?" He asked. "If I have to," Jared replied. "I'll protect that girl and her mother with my last breath, and I won't feel bad about it." Inside the root cellar, Vera held Luma close, both of them silent. She heard the voices, the threats, the fear. But she also heard Jared's voice steady, unshaken. He was standing for them, risking everything. Outside, Runk finally spat into the snow. "This ain't over," he said, backing away. "People won't forget this. Jared, I'm counting." "On it," Jared replied, not lowering his weapon. The men turned and walked off, grumbling, but they didn't look back. When the wind was quiet again, Jared opened the trapdoor. Vera climbed up slowly, holding Luma close. Her face was pale, her lips tight. "Are they gone?" she asked. "For now," Jared said, putting the shotgun back on the wall. He sat down heavily in his chair, rubbing his face. Vera stood still for a moment, then walked over and sat across from him. She looked at the fire, then at him, then whispered, "You could have given us up, but you didn't." Jared looked up at her, tired but honest. "I don't give away people who've done nothing wrong," he said. "You could have been shot." She said, voice cracking, "Then I would have." "Died doing something right," he said. Luma reached out and touched Jared's hand. He looked at her, and she smiled a small, brave smile that said thank you without words. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between the three of them. They were no longer strangers. They were becoming something more. A family made not by blood, but by choice. And snow, no matter how thick, could not bury that. The night after the men came was heavy and still. The fire burned low, soft cracks breaking the silence inside the cabin. Outside, the snow fell harder than before, like the world was trying to bury everything under white silence. Vera sat by the window, watching the snow fall. Luma was already asleep, curled under warm blankets near the fire. Jared sat in his chair, sharpening a long blade in slow, steady motions. The glow from the fire danced across his face, showing lines of worry, pain, and thought. Vera turned to him, her voice quiet. "You didn't have to protect us like that." Jared didn't look up, still working the blade. "I did," he said. "Because no one else would." Vera stood slowly and walked toward him. Stopping just a few steps away, she looked down at his hands, rough and tired, holding the blade like it was a part of him. Then she looked into his eyes. "You're always alone, aren't you?" she asked gently. Jared finally met her gaze. "It's easier that way," he said. "No one to lose. No one to hurt, but you're hurting already," she said. "I see it in your eyes, in how you walk, and how you look at my daughter." He didn't answer, just sat still, silent as stone. Vera stepped closer, slowly reaching out. Her fingers brushed his hand, and he didn't pull away this time. "I came here thinking I would sell myself to save her," she said, voice cracking. "I thought if I gave my body, maybe someone would feed her." Just once, she took a deep breath. "But you gave her food, warmth, and safety. And you didn't ask for anything." Jared's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Vera knelt in front of him, her hands trembling. "If I offer myself to you now, it's not because I owe you. It's not because I'm desperate," she whispered. "It's because I want to belong somewhere, and I want you to belong with us." Jared looked at her carefully, his voice soft. "You want to be mine?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'll be yours," she whispered, "if you'll be ours." He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly set the blade aside. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't need to." "Give yourself," he said gently. "You already gave me something I thought I'd never feel again." "What's that?" she asked, barely breathing hope. He said. She leaned into him. Resting her head on his chest, he wrapped his arms around her, not in hunger, not in greed, but in something pure and quiet, for the first time since the sickness took his family. Jared didn't feel hollow, and for the first time since running from pirates. Vera didn't feel like just a body. They sat like that, wrapped in warmth and silence. The fire crackled beside them, and outside, the snow kept falling, but in that cabin time paused, and two broken hearts began to mend. Later, Jared tucked another blanket over Luma, his hand resting gently on her tiny shoulder. "She's strong," he said. Like her mother, Vera smiled softly, leaning against the wall. "She didn't speak for days. Not until you gave her soup. She didn't need words." Jared replied. Her eyes said everything. They sat together near the fire, sipping tea made from dried roots. Vera watched Jared closely. "There's something different about you," she said. "Most men I met only took. I've done my share of taking," Jared said, looking into the flames. "But after I lost my family, I realized taking just leaves you emptier." Vera reached for his hand again. "You're not empty now," she whispered. He looked at her and shook his head. "No," he said, "not anymore." In the middle of the night, a storm hit the forest. Hard winds howled like wolves, and the walls groaned against the cold. But inside, Jared, Vera, and Luma lay close, sharing one bed, sharing one warmth. They didn't speak. They didn't move much. They just breathed in rhythm. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were something new, something stronger than what life had broken. They were a family, now not by blood, but by choice, and in a world filled with hunger, cold, and cruelty. That choice was everything. The storm passed by morning. The sky was clear, and the snow outside the cabin sparkled like crushed glass. Inside, the fire had burned low, but warmth still filled the room, not just from heat, but from the quiet closeness that now lived between them. Jared stepped outside early, shovel in hand, clearing a path through the snow. Vera stood by the window, watching him with soft eyes. Luma giggled as she tried on the old boots Jared had fixed for her. They were too big, but she didn't care. She dragged her feet proudly, like she was walking through her own little world after breakfast. Jared opened the wooden chest again and handed Vera a small cloth pouch. Inside were seeds, beans, roots, soft herbs for tea. Vera held them like they were treasure, her smile wide and bright. "We'll plant them in spring," Jared said. "Start small, just enough for 3. Vera looked at him and whispered, "No, we'll grow enough for 4. Maybe more if others ever need help like I did." He nodded, proud of the way she had already begun to think beyond survival. She was building, not just hiding anymore. But peace never stays quiet in places where cruelty still roams. And the men from the colony hadn't forgotten what Jared had done. That afternoon, a sound came from the woods' footsteps. Harsh and fast, Jared opened the door and saw a young man from the edge of the colony. Breathing hard, "They're coming back," he said. "Runk and some others. They've been talking in the bar all day. They've got more men with them, maybe 10. Jared didn't ask why the boy warned him. He simply nodded, thanked him, and went back inside. Vera saw it on his face. The tension, the quiet fire returning behind his eyes. "They're coming again?" she asked. He nodded. "This time, it's worse," he said. "I need to prepare." Vera didn't hesitate. "I'll help," she said. Jared stopped and looked at her for a long moment. "You're not the same woman I found in the snow," he said. "No," Vera replied, standing tall, "and I don't plan to be again." They stacked logs against the door, closed the shutters, and made warm broth for Luma. Jared cleaned his shotgun, checked the old hunting traps, and placed tools by the fire. But he didn't look scared, and neither did Vera. The sun began to fall when they heard the boots crunching. Through the snow, Jared stepped outside, shotgun across his chest. Runk stood there, flanked by others with rifles and heavy coats. He smirked. "You still hiding strays in there?" He called out. "No one's hiding," Jared replied. "They live here now." "You're going to regret this," Runk said. "Helping aliens instead of your own kind." Jared's voice was calm, but firm like iron. "If your kind means cowards who chase women and children through snow, then I'm fine standing alone." A few of the men behind Runk shifted, their eyes uncertain, and then, from the woods, more footsteps came. Figures appeared, wrapped in fur, carrying tools, not weapons. It was the farmers, the quiet neighbors, people who had watched from afar but had seen enough. They stood behind Jared, not saying a word, just standing tall. Runk stared, his smirk fading. You people really going to defend this? He spat. No one answered him, and sometimes silence says more than shouting ever can. Runk cursed and turned away, walking back through the snow. The others followed, some ashamed, some just tired. They were loud in the pub, but they didn't have the courage to fight a man who stood for something real. As the last boots disappeared into the trees, Jared lowered his shotgun. He turned to the others, and a few of them nodded in respect before heading back to their farms. Jared stepped back inside the cabin and closed the door behind him. Vera stood there, holding Luma, who had watched from the window. They left. She asked, "For now," Jared said. "Maybe for good." Luma raised her little hand and showed him a wooden toy. "Look, Papa," she said softly. Jared froze. His eyes filled with water, and he walked to her slowly. Kneeling down, "Say that again," he whispered. Luma touched his cheek. "Papa," she said, "you saved us." Vera covered her mouth, tears running down her face. She didn't correct her daughter. She didn't need to. That night, they sat by the fire, not just as survivors, but as something new. Vera leaned into Jared, Luma in her lap, and the warmth between them wasn't just from the flames. It came from the bond they had built, one day at a time, through fear, hunger, and hope. And as the fire burned brighter, the snow kept falling. But inside that small cabin, love had already melted the cold away.